Welcome to MEDMEN. My name's Pim, and that's Andy.
And what are we talking about today, Pim?
Today, Andy, we are talking about the importance of being proactive on decision criteria, as well as stakeholder engagement.
And we're doing this about a real life situation, right? Where we have bought a solution and we're currently, and maybe by the time this goes out, have bought another solution. So two solutions, two buying experiences from the customer side.
Yeah, and for me, like the headline is that even if you have the perfect scenario within a deal, you've received like a MEDDIC brief as a seller, you have a champion already, it doesn't mean that you can just sit there and the deal will fall into your lap.
Yeah. So the context here is we hired a new COO, Julie. Hi, Julie. And Julie came in with a wealth of experience and looked at some of the things we're doing and said, there's a huge opportunity here for us to unlock better experiences for our customers, more efficiency internally by implementing I guess you call it a customer success tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? It's essentially underpinning our customer journey with a lot of rigor so that customers get the value that they buy into.
Yes. And so Julie comes in and she doesn't just say this. She says, at my last company, we'll call them vendor A. Okay. We used vendor A and it's exactly what we need. And so Julie then talks to us about it, talks to me about it. And I, in this case, instantly, I'm the economic buyer and Julie is a champion. And she's not just a champion for vendor A, she's the champion for the initiative, right? So everything from my perspective is, yeah, okay, this sounds interesting. Her goal then is to go and engage with vendor A. And I think she talked to you about this, right? She brings you on as so classic kind of champion behavior there. She's bringing on the CRO in this case as a potential stakeholder. You got involved. Tell me about your experience.
Yeah, so my experience, first and foremost, I have a vested interest here on the basis of which I become a champion of the initiative, right? Not so much like vendor A or B in this case, but the initiative itself. Because for me, one of the strategic goals that we have as an organization to which these sellers could have attached themselves would be to have a solution like this to be in a better position to drive recurring business.
Yes.
Simple as that, right?
Yes.
And so my experience was like, okay, I'm in here now, but I'm not really being engaged or built as a champion. So I'm just, receiving information and seeing what we do.
Yeah, I think that's such an important distinction. We don't perhaps talk about that enough. This idea that you're a champion for the initiative, but not the vendor yet. And what would a vendor have to do in that situation to make you their champion?
Yeah, so it's connecting their decision criteria, the way that they do things uniquely or better than anyone else, to whatever I'm trying to achieve, the pain that I'm trying to solve for.
Yes.
Right? And whilst this was like obvious if they had done some proper discovery on it, they just didn't.
Yes.
And so, again, I remained a champion for the initiative, but that was on the basis of what I was able to find out without any help.
Yes. So we'll give this company, vendor A, we'll give them, I want to say the benefit of the doubt. I still think it's their job, even if they're like, well, Julie's bought us before. Julie's definitely acting as a champion. She's giving us insights. You're sharing all information. Like you said at the start, she literally gave a MEDDIC briefing to them, from the customer to the sales team. It's a dream. We'll give them benefit of the doubt that they felt they didn't need to differentiate that much. I mean, they definitely still should, but we'll give them that benefit of the doubt. What then happened? Why are we talking about this as opposed to just like, they gave us a price and we bought it? What happened next?
Yeah, I think we were looking at two solutions to benchmark it, right? To see what else is out there. Is there a better way?
Yeah, well, that was, Julie's come to me and I said, well, can we engage as the economic buyer? I'm thinking about the economic side of things. So I'm not saying to her, is there a company that has more integrations? I'm not saying, is there a company that has, better bells and whistles? I'm saying, I want us to have, if for no other reason, then when we enter into negotiations, we need a secondary economic benchmark. So that was, I think, in this situation, why, maybe there was an open-mindedness to, there could be a better vendor out there technically, but from my perspective, that's why.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is a key point if you think about economic buyers. It's not the technical decision criteria, it's the economic decision criteria, right? Because you didn't get involved in any demos.
I literally saw it for the first time yesterday, and that was maybe a month after we signed the contract.
Yeah, it's implemented now.
Yes, it's implemented, yeah. But to your point, I as an economic buyer, I do not care about the bells and the whistles. I care about, I'm higher up on the value pyramid, so to speak. I'm thinking about how can we provide better experiences to our customers? How can we be more efficient economically ourselves? How can we make sure we don't miss things with our customers? All the things that a customer success platform does at the high level, the high value level, that's what I'm interested in. And from a buying process perspective, I care about those 3 C's. I care about costs, so not specifically the cost of the solution itself, but the cost and time, the resource costs. I care about completion. How much is this likely to be a success? I'm leaning heavily on Julie as like, is this definitely going to be worthwhile us doing this? Could we spend our resources in other places and it be better, get more value from it? And I care about the confidence. I was very much, if you or Julie said we need to do this, it would have been done without any more questions from me. That's if you had that confidence, those are things I was looking for. But even though we had the confidence, it definitely seemed like the right thing to do. Do you remember where we were when you told me how much it was going to cost?
It sounds like you do.
I did. We were in Barcelona on the balcony.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Overlooking the beautiful city of Barcelona. Yeah. And I remember, as you were telling me about this, I wasn't thinking about the cost. I wasn't thinking about, I wonder how much this is going to be. I was thinking, this is so funny. It's wrong to say I don't care how much this costs, because there's obviously limits to where I would have said, that's absolutely ridiculous. But I was thinking about it from a perspective of, isn't it funny how Pim is kind of trying to softly deliver the price to me? Like you were kind of reminding me of why we're doing it, doing a good job for a champion, right? Of the initiative, I'll say.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking to myself, like the voice in my head was going, isn't this funny? I wasn't thinking, is it going to be 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000? Where do I think it's going to be? I was just purely thinking about that. So when you told me the price of what it was, I wasn't like, that's more than I thought it would be, less, because I genuinely had no...
It didn't know.
I didn't know. I did know in my mind, I'm thinking, if this saves us losing one customer because it prompts us to some data that helps us to do a better job and
it's paid for
the customer, then it's paid for itself just once. So the business case in my mind is rock solid, because I know that there's so much value you can get from this solution. But what I did care about, going back to the costs, not just being about that price, was that we're getting a good deal. And I didn't feel like we were getting a good deal. My experience of buying literally all of the technology we've bought over the last 4 years is that what's presented to me as the economic buyer as the best and final price is never the best and final price. I've always managed to get much better terms, if nothing else. So my pushback to you and to Julie was, I think we can do better. I think we can do better. And the way I presented you should push that forward was to say, bring in vendor B, who by this point, by the way, we should just mention, had come in, done an okay job, had not differentiated themselves from what I understand in the decision criteria. They're just sort of presenting it was like, okay, it was like for like.
A little bit better on stakeholder engagement, but that's about it.
Yeah. Right. But pretty much, from a technical decision criteria perspective, really we were just going by what Julie knew that she needed because she'd used a solution like that before. So in my mind, I'm saying, go use vendor B as a negotiation tool. And I fully expected, if you'd have asked me at that point to bet $1,000, if you get this right, what happens next? The next thing I would have heard is, we signed up with vendor A, and guess what, Andy, you were right. We got an extra X dollars off, or we got better terms, whatever it may have been, that was that sweetener that I felt we needed, that's still there to have. But what actually happened, Pim?
Well, we actually ended up going with vendor B.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there was no differentiation through decision criteria as we spoke about. There had not really been proactive stakeholder engagement, no attachment to strategic goals. And therefore, the result, quite simple, it came down to a price decision in the end. And so vendor B coming in like significantly more interesting from a pure price point of view. And we all said that platform is going to do great for us. Yeah. And that's how, this ended up being the decision.
Yeah. And I think the bottom line there is that, price bombing is not selling. You might as well just say, well, what's the best price you've had so far? Okay, we'll do 20% less. We'll do 10% less, whatever it is. You don't need salespeople to do that. You don't need, it's not selling. It's order taking.
No. So the inverse, if there was a scenario in which either of these vendors had attached themselves to our, retention goal, the essence of a platform to help do that, engagement proactively with the economic buyer. I was going there. Don't worry. And just doing a more solid job in attaching the vested interest of the champions that they could have been building. a very different scenario would have been possible.
Yeah, I was, I'm right here.
Yeah.
Hello, Julie would have definitely introduced me if nothing else, and even they didn't, they could have come directly to me, but they didn't. But I will say, and this comes back to the point we make about the second solution, we're in the process of buying. There's a vendor. We'll call them vendor A. So new vendors, completely different product this time. Vendor A, who this is quite funny actually. The first I heard of vendor A ever, I'd never even heard their name before, was where their founder and CEO sent me a very nice, very well thought out email saying, hey, seems like you're looking at our solution. I would like just to give you my support as an executive sponsor. And then
what did you think?
Well, I literally went, I went onto Slack and I went to the leadership channel and I was like,
what?
Who's vendor A? And everyone was like, oh yeah, we're looking at this. And I'm not precious, of course, but I was just curious. I was like, well, what do you think of the email? And we started talking as you would, as sort of sales-minded people. We started dissecting their email as a classic kind of economic buyer opener. So there's nothing in theory wrong with the CEO founder reaching out to me, and then the CRO did the same as well. It shows the power of MEDDIC in togetherness, not in isolation. Because in this case, this vendor, they did a great job of engaging with me, but the champion work they did hadn't got to me yet. They hadn't empowered you, or as this case would be Jess, our CMO, to engage to tell me about it. We're looking at the solution. They weren't that far along, or hadn't sort of built Jess as a champion enough, or inspired her to engage me by this point.
Yeah, this is super interesting because we talk about multi-threading as a best practice and should be a common practice, right? But for someone to think like, hey, let's just do like EB engagement without mobilizing the champion to make that land within the right context, it can be a dangerous game. Now, in this case, it doesn't necessarily hurt their chances. It's just a bit like, okay, what is this about? And then, you need to catch up and you kind of need to clean up the situation that it created.
Yeah.
But it's not that impactful. However, there can be a case in which you initiate multi-threading and it backfires, right? So I would always go back to like, hey, collaborate with your champion. Their vested interest will make it so that engagement is important to them too. Yes. And they will help you do it, and it will be much more effective.
Yeah, agreed. I will say that because of how well thought out the emails were, I did hold a small amount of advocacy for them. I was also a bit curious because they did mention vendor B in their email. I see you're also looking at vendor B, which I thought was, I don't think that's, we don't, the classic line of like, if you're thinking about your competition, you're not thinking about yourself, and, you should focus on your strengths, not their weaknesses.
And by the way, probably Inertia is a bigger competitor for them than the actual other vendor, but.
Absolutely, for sure. Yes. They should be focusing on the value they can bring. So I did hold them a little bit of advocacy for them. But then again, same thing happened. We met here yesterday in the meeting room, and Jess, our CMO, presented the plan to me, and this was the first time I was formally hearing about this. Did a great job of building built a metrics map to present, which was quite fun. That's probably a topic for a future episode. And we're going, as I understand it, or we're leaning towards vendor B right now. Maybe by the time this comes out, we might have made a decision. But the point being, we're still in the same scenario that we were in with the other buying process, which is that neither vendor has really kind of worked with us to inspire differentiation into our decision criteria. So we're finding our own way and going, that vendor is actually better for us. But should vendor C come on the horizon, I don't know what the unique differentiation vendor B, which is currently our vendor of choice, has to defend. I just feel like vendor C could turn up and say, oh, you're looking at vendor B? We do all of that as well. And, we're cheaper, or we've got this that they don't have. And all of a sudden, they've basically built pipeline from the work that vendor A and vendor B have done.
Yeah, it's still like the dependency that you kind of see in these cases is that, we are kind of hoping, wishing and wanting for our buyers to be professional buyers and figure it out on their own to a degree. And sure, we'll do some of the work there and ensure that we make an informed decision on platforms like these. But even with 3 champions in a business, winning a deal that might look perfect on the surface is not a foregone conclusion, is it?
Yeah, exactly right. The 3 champions you're talking about there is because in this second scenario, there's of course you as a champion because you've got a revenue interest in this. There's Jessie as a champion because she has a marketing interest or media interest, but also Julie because she can see the operational gains that this solution will bring as well. So you do genuinely have 3 champions there. And in the case of vendor A, no deal.
Should I tell you a small secret?
Go on.
I haven't heard from them just yet as a potential champion.
You'd think they'd be straight on to you, but apparently not.
Well, let's see if it has changed by the time that this episode comes out. I'll keep you posted.
I'll drink to that.
All right.
Cheers, Ben.
Cheers, Andy.